What's up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be checking out a new plugin from Acustica Audio called Mystic. It is an all-tube channel strip, which seems to be sampled from Tree Audio's Branch 2 channel strip. In the short time I've been demoing this, it's helped me take a really harsh vocal and make it warmer and thicker, which is what you expect from an all-tube channel strip. So today I'll show you how to use the plugin, and we'll run it through some basses and guitars and vocals. Let's go. So let's check out the plugin. As you can see, it's a pretty gorgeous GUI. If you turn off the audio going through it, the tube stops lighting up, and then if you turn it on, it lights back up again. It's kind of cool. I dig it. I like cool GUIs. Pretty simple plugin. It has a high pass and a low pass, and as you can see from my EQ curve here, you can turn the filter on, and it's fairly sharp and goes all the way up to 250 or just out. And then the low pass goes all the way down to 9. Next is the preamp section, and this is where things get interesting. And when we check out the bass example, you'll hear the difference. But this is the preamp on and off. And then you have this ultra button, and what that does is, I'm going to read it from the manual. Pressing this button shapes the preamp stage more accurately when it passes the breakpoint to better simulate preamp saturation. And what you'll notice is when I played the bass example is you will hear a bit more saturation with that in. Next is what they call debump, and if you look at the EQ curve here, there is, every preamp has its own sound, and this is the sound of this preamp. Now, if you take off the debump, you'll notice it goes flat for the most part. And so what that does is it turns off the preamp's frequency response. And by doing that, you can get a more, accurate saturation of what the signal is. If you have this and you have a bass instrument, and you'll notice that there's a little bit, it's pretty hard to notice, but with the bass, you hear just a little bit more distortion when the debump is on, and it makes sense because you're not, taking 2 dB of the low end off. The level is auto gained so that you can crank it up and get more saturation without actually bringing up the level. And then there's also a preamp out, which actually gives you more level. Next is the EQ. It's a very simple Baxendale EQ. You have a low and a high, and I can boost this up. You guys can see it's just a very smooth Baxendale shelf at the low end, and then the same in the high end, all the way down to 7. And it sounds really sweet. I said in the beginning, I just used this on a mix that had a really bright, kind of harsh vocal. And so I ran the preamp pretty hard, and that warmed it up a bit. And then I brought some bass in there around 800 hertz, I think. So that thickened it up, but also adding this high end back in after doing that gave it some of the brightness I wanted back, but we had created warmth with the preamp in the low end. So it was a cool way to shape something like that. And then lastly is the compressor. You have 3 modes. You have classic, unlinked, and then unlinked zero attack. The classic is the original limiter, just sampled the way it was from Tree Audio. The unlinked is kind of cool. It's a second limitering mode, but it's just the same original limiter, but with a left and right side basically, right? So you can use it as a stereo limiter. And then the third one, I'm going to read this from the manual, the original compressor unlinked with SHMOD, S-H-M-O-D, enabled. This subjectively adjusts the attack envelope contour to better shape transients. So it's something we can play with maybe on drums or something like that. This is the trim button for the limiter if you need more gain or less gain. Then your gain reduction, obviously. Really smooth sidechain high pass filter here. Wet and dry mix. I like this knob. It's kind of cool. Here you have your attack and release time. So they work as one. So if you reduce the attack time, it's also reducing the release time, vice versa. Output gain. And then finally, you do have oversample here up to 8x. Let's get into some listening examples. We'll start off with the bass first because I was talking about it earlier. So you guys can hear the preamp in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on. You'll see it turn on so we can hear the difference. Then we'll crank up the level to get to some of the saturation. And then we'll turn on ultra, turn off ultra, turn on debump, turn off B-bump, and you guys can hear what these different things can do and how they can shape the sound. So there's quite a few different sounds we got out of that. You notice that the saturation was there, like you heard the sound of the box, which was nice, but then the Ultra gave it a little bit more saturation. And then when we took that D-bump, I'm going to call it D-bump, when we turned that on, you got even more low-end saturation. I think that's because if you remember the curve, it was rolling off towards the low end, and that, gives us even more, especially for something like a bass. So what's cool about the preamp is you can get quite a few different flavors using the Ultra, the D-bump, and then how hard you push the preamp. All right, next, let's move on to a vocal, and this is a good vocal example because it is a little bright, and maybe we can warm it up using the Mystic. So I'm just going to kind of go in on it, and then we'll do some A-B comparison once we're done.
Last night I was out with the boys till 2. It's gonna take a whole month to make it up to you. I guess my heart is just a little too wild. But this is who I was the whole time. You used to make it out to every one of my shows, and now I'm begging on my knees to try to get you to go. Well, if I'm lucky, maybe when I get back, you'll be waiting with all your bags packed, and you'll be complaining. But honey, I'm done explaining. Last night I was out with the boys till 2. It's gonna take a whole month to make it up to you.
So you can hear it does a really great job of giving some more vocal clarity while also warming the vocal up. I think it's really exceeds at doing that. Let's now bring in the compressor and see what that can bring to the table.
Last night I was out with the boys till 2. It's gonna take a whole month to make it up to you. I guess my heart is just a little too wild. But this is who I was the whole time. You used to make it out to every one of my shows, and now I'm begging on my knees to try to get you to go. Well, if I'm lucky, maybe when I get back, you'll be waiting with all your bags packed, and you'll be complaining. Last night I was out with the boys till 2. It's gonna take a whole month to make it up to you. I guess my heart is just a little too wild. But this is who I was the whole time. You used to make it out to every one of my shows, and now I'm begging on my knees to try to get you to go. Well, if I'm lucky, maybe when I get back, you'll be waiting with all your bags packed, and you'll be complaining.
So you see the compressor is actually a pretty slow compressor. And so I think if you want to use it on a vocal, you kind of want just a little bit, and then maybe you could put 1176 or something faster, some FET compressor after it. If you need a little more of that energy and a quicker compressor, it'd be a good compressor to use together. But overall, I love this thing on vocals, especially the pre and EQ section of it. All right, guys, lastly, let's just run it through some drums and see what we can come up with. We'll do the same kind of thing we just did with the vocal. I'll just start playing with it and see what we get. Let's do it. We'll start with the drums drive so you guys can hear it. So cool, you can play with it. It's a nice little like finisher for a drum bus or something like that. Even the compressor sounded cool, blended as, mixed in just to give it a little bit more energy. But I think this can work really well on just about anything that you need to get some warmth and just some overall polish. All right, guys, so that is Mystic by Acustica Audio. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I think it can be a great plugin for warming up something that's a bit too thin or harsh, as well as just a nice tone shaping box. If you need your songs mixed or mastered, hit me up at mixandmastermysong.com. You can also find my courses and presets there too. Talk to you soon.